So do you want to tell me when?
Yeah, I'll go and listen to the sounds of which carry on.
Oh, well, do you want to check the sound? Because the first one I did, I had to do again because it didn't take the sound. So I'm always a bit nervous about having to. Yeah. Right, so if we're all ready. Right, welcome. I'm going to talk this evening about lactose and casein, milk intolerance and milk allergy. And we have to thank the NutriCentre for letting us come here and put together a talk so that everybody can hear. I'm Diane Shepperson-Mills. I work here at the Hale on Mondays and some Wednesdays. I run the endometriosis and fertility clinic. I did a degree in nutrition at Manchester University, and then I did an OU degree in education and psychology. Then I was very ill with endometriosis and couldn't get well. I did get well with nutritional medicine, and I wanted to know why I got well with nutritional medicine. And the only course I could find at the time that looked at body biochemistry was the Institute for Optimum Nutrition course at ION. So I did that for 3 years. And then I did an MA in health education looking specifically at fertility and nutrition. And I'm at present embarking on PhD to look at what's happening with wheat and fertility. So I'm endometriosis.co.uk, makingbabies.com, and Diane at endometriosis.co.uk. So we're going to look at milk, because it's a staple food in our diet. You know, we're given it as a baby, and most of us can manage with it for the rest of our lives in moderate amounts. But what's going on with some people we needed to investigate, because I've come across so many people who are having reactions to milk. In milk you have milk sugar, lactose. I've forgotten my pointy pen, so I'm reduced to the ruler. And it's a disaccharide. That means it's a double sugar. And it's a common cause of digestive problems. There's also milk protein, casein, which can also trigger digestive symptoms. Now, a young child usually manages to digest lactose with no problem at all. And they have plenty of lactase enzyme from the pancreas, which breaks down the lactose to 2 simple sugars. And that process works happily as most of us are children. Dairy allergy, however, is different to lactose intolerance. A dairy allergy is an immune intolerance to the protein in the milk, the casein or the whey or the lactalbumin, and it involves reactions that affect the GI tract, the gut, and skin and the respiratory tract, and multiple systems, as in systemic anaphylaxis. Some of my friends were on holiday in the Netherlands with some of their friends, and they had a 14-year-old son, and it was a lovely hot sunny day just like today, and they all wanted an ice cream, but the 14-year-old boy had a dairy allergy. So they went round all the outlets and found somebody that sold sorbet with no dairy in it. So they all had ice cream, and he had a lemon sorbet. And within 2 minutes he was dead, because they'd used the scoop for the ice cream in the sorbet, so the milk particles were on the lemon sorbet, and his throat seized up and he died. So this can be quite serious with anaphylaxis for some people. And the reactions are an IgE, an immunoglobulin E, and it can cause severe morbidity and death. This is from the Annals of Allergy and Asthma Immunology in 2002. Dietary elimination, however, you're fine. So we've got 2 things going on. We've got lactose intolerance, and you can have some people with a true dairy allergy, which is a reaction to the protein, not the sugars. So we have, oh, that's not very good, is it? But that's cheeses. Not a very good, it's fine on mine, but it's too dark on there. So, food allergies and intolerances. Many factors can trigger food allergies, including increased absorption of poorly digested protein fragments. The amino acids, instead of breaking into singles, stay in little peptide chains, and they can leak into the blood circulation across the gut wall if the gut wall's leaky. This is from Biology Revolution 1984. So dairy could have this double impact in a very few people where they're lactose intolerant and have an allergy to the casein. That's very rare. Most people may have lactose intolerance. A few may have a dairy allergy to casein, but they wouldn't always have both. But this is just to show that dairy can work in two distinct ways. Then you've got the problem of people who are diagnosed with full-blown celiac disease, because lactose intolerance has been observed as a secondary feature in celiac disease patients. Tropical sprue patients, people with acute intestinal infections and cystic fibrosis. This is from the Merck manual. People with severe alcoholism. This is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Pelvic radiation therapy from Support Care Cancer. And Crohn's disease from the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology. But once you've treated the underlying condition and corrected it, then you find that you restore the lactase activity and the person can go on having dairy foods. So it's a temporary thing if the gut membrane's badly damaged by another disorder or disease. But many people seem to complain about undiagnosed lactose intolerance, and I've even sent patients to doctors where the doctors have said there's no such thing and they can't test for it. But many people do have undiagnosed lactose intolerance, and dairy foods are the exclusive dietary source of lactose, the milk sugar. And they're used, of course, when you're making convenience foods. They could be in sauces, they can be powdered milk in bread, cakes, biscuits, so it can infiltrate into lots of other foods that we buy. Now, what are the symptoms? What's happening if you react to lactose, milk sugar? Well, you could get diarrhea, you could get bloating, abdominal cramps, minor dyspepsia, a bit sort of gurgly and nausea, flatulence and bad wind, failure to thrive in children. They're not growing properly because they're not absorbing nutrients properly, and irritable bowel syndrome. This is the Journal of American Osteopathic Association. There was a study done on 146 children who had IBS and diarrhea, and 24.3% were shown to be lactose intolerant when they were tested. And 5 years later, 87.5% were still showing a benefit from a lactose-free diet. And I can't see where this is on there. It's the South Medical Journal. So we can see that some people are struggling with milk sugar. The research with tropical gastroenterology, Rana et al., found that patients with diarrhea predominant irritable bowel syndrome have a higher incidence of lactose intolerance. 82% of the people with the bad diarrhea and irritable bowel, rather than patients who've got the spastic cramping sort of IBF, or features of both the cramping and the diarrhea. So obviously it can cause diarrhea in many people, though I have heard some people say that they become constipated with dairy food. So milk sugar lactose, it is digested in the small intestine by the enzyme which we make called lactase. And if lactose is not digested and absorbed in the chyme, which is the liquid that all our food becomes as it's mixed with saliva and the water we drink, then the sugars are broken down by bacteria when it reaches the colon. So if we don't have lactase, it starts causing a fermented, bubbly, frothy mess in our colon, and you get this gas, bloating, abdominal cramps, and maybe diarrhea. And the stools can often be light-coloured and frothy, and sometimes they have mucus. Dairy foods, bananas and pork are mucus-forming foods. So you often find that if you're having a problem with dairy, you get mucus on your stools. Now, the loss of lactase, the vast majority of adults lose their ability to make lactase enzyme in the pancreas as you grow into an adult. And some people find it difficult to tolerate even a glass of milk. And this is the Journal of American Dietetic Association. So it is well known that it does affect some people. And as I said, lactose, I should have put an O there. So lactose is a disaccharide, a double sugar. And it's made up of glucose and galactose, two sugars, single sugars, simple sugars joined together. And the lactase enzyme in the pancreas breaks down the lactose into glucose and galactose. They can then be absorbed into the bloodstream with no problem, and then all the problem that people have with digestion goes. Lactase enzymes begin to disappear after infants are weaned. They always say, baby cows should drink cow's milk, baby humans should drink human's milk. And many adults have very little lactase enzyme left. So that's why the glass of milk can cause digestion problems if your pancreas has given up making the lactase enzyme. So pancreas insufficiency. The pancreas sits at the side of the liver and it's producing hormones, insulin and glucagon. They regulate carbohydrate metabolism and maintain your blood sugar balance. You have 8 pints of blood rushing around your body, and at any moment in time you need 2 or 3 teaspoons of glucose to give energy to your body cells and your brain. So if you eat masses of sugary food, chocolates and cakes and biscuits and soufflés and whatever, then your pancreas has to struggle and make more insulin, glucagon, glucose tolerance factor to normalise your blood sugar back down again. It's also an exocrine organ. It secretes enzymes like trypsin to digest protein, lipase to digest the milk sugar, and amylase to digest carbohydrates. So they're all necessary for specific foods to be digested. So if that one blocks out, you're going to have a problem digesting milk. And the pancreas also produces other enzymes. Gastrin, it helps secretion of gastrin from the stomach, secretin and cholecystokinin from the small intestine. Cholecystokinin is quite fascinating because when you're secreting cholecystokinin, it sends a message to the brain that you're full and that you don't need any more food. So they're like messenger hormones. And of course, things like celiac disease would stop production of these because it breaks up the villi in the small intestine. This is celiac disease, HarperCollins. So a lack of lactase enzyme can be a problem. It's not an abnormality, it's not an illness. It's just something that happens as we grow up. It's a normal part of growing up. 1965, Baltimore Johns Hopkins University tested 60 patients. 15% of the white adults had digestive symptoms after they had cow's milk, but 70% of the African Americans had digestive systems when they had cow's milk. This is the Lancet, 1985. So more research was done to look at who it affected. And you've got the ethnic group and the percentage of lactose tolerance. So African black people struggle with lactose because they run out of lactase, 97 to 100%. Asians, it's 90 to 100% it affects. Jewish descent people, it's 60 to 80%. Mediterranean people, 60 to 80%. Mexicans, 70 to 80%. Middle band Europeans, 10 to 20%. North American black people, 70 to 75%. North American Caucasian white are 7 to 15%. And Northern Europeans, 1 to 5%. And they still don't really know how that happened. And why it's in specific people and not as much in others. Well, it may be after we came out of Africa something happened. You know, we don't really know. So the obvious sources are all cows' dairy products. Obviously anything out of an udder, essentially. All cheeses have lactase and casein. Butter, some margarines have got whey in. There are a few that don't. Goat, sheep, buffalo and camel milk, which I don't recommend. I didn't enjoy that. Half cream, single, double clotted creams, ice cream, sherbet, mascarpone, cream fresh, milks and yogurts. So obviously, if you have a problem with lactase and or casein, you've got a big lump of foods there that you can't eat. And we need to look at what you can do in place of them if you have a problem. But then, of course, there's the hidden sources. It's like the wheat. It can be hidden and masked. So it can be an artificial sweetness, breading on fried food, because some of the bread's made with, powdered milk. Bread, pizza, cake, biscuits, crackers, donuts, breakfast and cereals, buttered or creamed foods, cakes, biscuits, puddings, pancakes, waffles, candies, milk chocolate, processed meat, non-dairy creamers, which you would think wouldn't have anything in them. Some prescription drugs contain lactose, like some thyroid. Some GnRH analogues like Zoladex use lactose as a carrier. Some of the oral contraceptive pills have got it in, some HRT. And of course some nutritional supplements. You always need to look and check if it's lactose free, and some weight reduction products. And lactose drugs, Ativan, so there's a whole list: Coumadin, Imodium, Premarin, Sudafed, Synthyroid, Zantac, Zoladex. So you always need to check your antibiotics or your medication. Get the pharmacist to read the ingredient list on the label, like I have to do for wheat, and check that it's not in, otherwise you're drip feeding it into your body every day. And then of course food labels: whey, casein, caseinates, sodium caseinate, lactose. So you have to be astute and watch what's happening, and that it's not going into you if you react badly. So they did a lactose challenge test at the Maryland House with inmates. They gave them a lactose challenge test showing again that 10% of the white inmates developed symptoms, but 90% of the African Americans developed symptoms. So obviously there's something genetic going on with what we've inherited from our parents, that the pancreas stops producing the lactase earlier So there's this primary lactose intolerance, which is the genetic lack of lactase, which is normally present at the brush border of the small intestine. And it's normal, it's not a disease, it's not a condition, it's just something that happens genetically. They say it occurs in 25% of the US population, more in certain ethnic groups, as we've seen. And the research shows that it's a single nucleotide polymorphism, CT13910 and G/A13910. They both contribute to lactase non-persistent phenotypes. So if your mother or father carry that, we've got it. And the CT13910 is the original form. The other one's a newer form that's developed. It's the same with the gluten sensitivity, how new forms are developing. And then, as we've said, there's a secondary lactose intolerance, which occurs as a result of another disease which can destroy the brush border. So things like celiac disease, or it can be parasites, which can be from dogs, cats, animals, dirty water, or after a viral infection. If the mucosal integrity is restored, the lactase activity can come back again. So if you're having something that's destroying the brush border, once you cure that and clear that and the brush border renews itself, then you are normally okay. One study, which is, I'm trying to see where that one's from and I can't see on there. This is the Actica Pediatric, it's Swedish. A study on patients with celiac disease showed that they'd all recovered from lactose intolerance 8 weeks after coming off dairy and wheat. So they improved as soon as it was found out and they changed their diet. Other research is showing alactasia, which is a congenital lactase deficiency. And again, it's saying 15% of Northern Europeans, 80% of Africans and Latin origin people, 100% of American Indians and Asians do not maintain the brush border enzyme lactase after the first 5 years of life. And without lactase, lactose can be considered a toxin because it cannot be digested by humans. It causes all this fermentation and frothing, produces additional toxins. It increases the burden on the liver as it's trying to detoxify everything else, and may be compromised if the burden continues for a long, prolonged period of time. So the liver's going to be struggling on a daily basis. This is the American Family Physician. So lactose tolerance tests, which measure your ability to break down lactose. There's a lactose tolerance blood test, and there's the hydrogen breath test. So the blood test, it says avoid strenuous exercise before the test and fast for 8 hours. The blood is drawn obviously through a needle, but I'm a coward now. So I always ask for a butterfly needle, which is a little thin needle rather than a great big bodkin looking thing. I feel much happier then. So the blood test is considered normal if your glucose level rises more than 30 milligrams per deciliter within 2 hours of drinking a lactose solution. 20 to 30 milligrams per deciliter is inconclusive, but the blood test is considered abnormal if your glucose level rises less than 20 milligrams per deciliter within 2 hours of drinking the lactose solution. So the doctor or the hospital lab can test you and your blood to see if you react to lactose. Then there's the hydrogen breath test for lactose intolerance. Again, do not eat for 8 hours before the test. And they say avoid fibre for 24 hours before the test and avoid tobacco smoke. because that can affect the hydrogen. So it's considered normal if the increase in hydrogen is less than 12 parts per million over your fasting pre-test level. Over 12 parts per million, the test is considered positive because you have trouble breaking down the lactose. The false negative rate is 10%, and they think that that is due to people who are taking drugs with lactose in at the same time that they're taking the test. So they think they're off lactose, but they're actually taking something with it hidden in. So what do you do? Well, you can do a month's exclusion diet to see if your bowel improves. All sources of lactose can be avoided. And obvious and hidden sources of dairy foods, you have to seek out what you're eating that's got the little words at the bottom saying lactose or whatever. Some people are also intolerant to fructose, sucrose and maltose, which are also sugars. Normal fruit sugar, sucrose is table sugar, and maltose is from the malt in wheat and barley, and I have to seek that one out. So that's the lactose, and then I'm going on to the casein, the milk protein, which may be an allergy or it may not in some people. But there is some new research coming from Australia and New Zealand which is very interesting. So casein is the protein in milk, and it can be used to make buttons. I don't know whether some buttons could be plastic, but some buttons and some heels on shoes can be made from casein that's been hardened. When the milk is cooked, i.e. they pasteurize it, the milk protein is also cooked. So some people, around us we've still got a little farmer with his little green milk float who comes round and he has unpasteurized milk, because some people can tolerate unpasteurized milk because the protein in it hasn't been cooked. It's straight from the cow's udder. Whereas when we're drinking pasteurized milk, the protein in it is cooked. So some people's immune system doesn't like that. So some people find it easier to digest the unpasteurized milk, and some of these farmers sell it online. But he does a roaring trade going around Sussex selling his unpasteurized milk. The other problem in milk can be the casomorphins. So the bovine milk from cattle is 87% water and 13% solids. The solids are the fats, the protein, the lactose, the minerals, the vitamins. And there are differences in that balance with different breeds of cow and different cows. The Holstein and Friesian cows produce milk that is 12% solids. Those are the black and white ones. And the Jersey cows produce milk that is 13% solids. So there's a difference between them. So we've got casein and whey. Little Miss Muffet, who sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider and sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. So she was eating the proteins, the curds and the whey. The whey stay in solution as a liquid. The curds contain the casein, and they precipitate out as a solid. That's what they do when they make cheese and butter. They take the whey away and use the solids. So casein proteins, they form the crust. You know, if you're making rice pudding or egg custard or something, and you get the brown crispy bit on the top that my mother loves, that's the casein cooking to a crust. So we've got different, this is where it gets intriguing, more complicated but intriguing. With these casein proteins, there's alpha casein, beta casein and kappa casein. And 1 litre of milk contains 9 to 12 grams, about 2 teaspoonfuls of milk protein, the casein. And all the proteins are made up of amino acids containing 1 gram of nitrogen. And we know about amino acids. It's like a dictionary. We've got 26 letters in the alphabet, and look how big and fat dictionaries are. So you've got 20 amino acids found in human tissues. 8 are essential, 10 are needed by infants and the elderly, and 12 you can make internally from the other amino acids in your cells. They're unbuttoned. They're all proteins are tightly curled, and your body unwinds them and breaks down the proteins into amino acid sections, which are a bit like coloured popper beads. So you break them down and then you stitch them back up again in any formula you like. The digestive enzymes, we've said, are from the mouth, stomach, pancreas and the small intestine. They also break down the protein like the trypsin and peptin in our food to a single amino acid. Before they break it to a single amino acid popper bead, however, we get these peptide chains, like about 5 beads stuck together. And some of these peptide chains, if you've got a leaky gut, they can float into your bloodstream and they're absorbed as a short chain rather than amino acid. And your immune system doesn't know what that is, so alarm bells go off because it may not recognize that formula. And that once they're in the bloodstream, it can cause your immune system to react. So we also in this process have hydrolysis. Hydro meaning water, lysis breaking down. So water molecules in your body are broken down as well when you're breaking down the proteins into peptides and amino acids. So amino acids should go into the bloodstream as a single thing, but then you get these peptide chains. So what's going on with this beta-casein? It's a folded chain of 209 amino acids. So it's a long chain of 209 amino acids. They're usually curled. And there are 8 different forms of this beta-casein. A, B, C, D, E, and F. Very original. A comes in 3 types. A1, A2, A3. The most common forms that they find in the dairy food are A1 beta-casein and A2 beta-casein. And they've discovered that that is the original one. This is the Advanced Dairy Chemistry book. So there are 2 main forms of this protein. So A1 and A2 beta-casein. And there's a difference between them. And it's fascinating. The amino acid at position 67 in this 209 long chain is different. In A1 beta-casein, it's histidine at that position, whereas in A2 beta-casein, it's proline. So there's something gone on to make it change. I'll tell you the story in a minute. So there's one tiny amino acid difference, yet major effects happen when they're digested, and we want to know why. Well, these 3 scientists in New Zealand found out why. A2 beta-casein, the proline binds closely to position 66, which is an amino acid isoleucine, and position 68, which it doesn't tell me what it is, which is also tightly bound, and the digestive enzyme finds it difficult to break that bond. But the A1 beta-casein, the digestion of A1, produces a string of amino acids called beta-casomorphin 7. They call it BCM7. Now, casomorphin reacts like a morphine, like an opioid in the body. And the histidine link with position 66, isoleucine, and 68 is easily broken down by digestive enzymes. And that doesn't happen with A1. This is in the Milk Protein Polymorphism International Dairy Federation special publication and that was in 1997, and also in a material with opioid activity in bovine milk and milk products, and beta-casomorphin and related peptides. I can't see that reference there. So casomorphins come from the casein. They're opioid, narcotic type properties. Caso meaning casein, and morphin meaning morphine. And Morpheus was the Greek god of sleep. So the casein has these narcotic properties, and that was first reported in Germany in 1979. This is the structure of active components from bovine casein peptone, and the material with opioid activity in bovine and milk products. This is in the archives of pharmacology and physiological chemistry. And again, I can't read that one, which is, I can't see that one at all. It's too at the bottom. So the bad property that's in the A1 beta-casein is this BCM, beta-casein 7. And the full structure is this little peptide chain: tyrosine, proline, phenylalanine, proline, glycine, proline, isoleucine. And they write it like that, with just the initials of each one. And the bonds linking the prolines are string-like, and they give the BCM7 a great resistance to being broken down. And apparently the researchers, who is Keith Woodford, the devil in the milk, having 3 proline molecules like that close together is very unusual, very surprising. It's rarely found in nature. So Japanese and German scientists have reported that they couldn't get any release of the BCM7 from the A2 beta-casein. They could only get it from the A1 beta-casein. And this is in milk protein polymorphisms. New Zealand Dairy Research Institute, the scientists reported in 2001 in a patent relating to A1 milk and autism and relating mental diseases that they had investigated whether BCM7 could be released from A2 milk, but the patent application was subsequently abandoned because they couldn't find that it was released in the A2 milk. It's fascinating, isn't it? Like being Sherlock Holmes. So their conclusion was that if BCM7 was released from the hydrolysis of A2 casein, the rate of reaction was many orders of magnitudes less than from A1 casein, beta casein. They couldn't find it. Now obviously digestion is thermogenic. You get hot, your body's hot, 37 degrees, and everything is happening at temperature. And there are random elements that are released as the process progresses. So things that happen within the gut, they can't always see properly. So as we've said, the beta casein, there's A3 types, B, C, D, E and F. And what they've shown is that B, C and F all have histidine at 0.67 on the 209 link. Therefore they all behave like A1 milk. And what we know from amino acid research is that histidine is pro-inflammatory. It has a trigger for inflammation responses. Whereas A1, 2 and 3, D and E beta casein all have proline at 67 and behave like A2 milk. And proline in the body as an amino acid has an anti-inflammatory reaction. So what happens when we're babies with the human milk? Well, human milk's higher in lactose than cow's milk. It's got similar fats, it's lower in protein, and it's lower in minerals like calcium, sodium, and potassium. So it's isoosmotic with blood in the mammary glands so that nutrients can pass into it. So the milk allergies relate to the proteins. The protein level in human milk is 1.6% in the first few days after birth, then it drops to 0.9%, whereas the protein level in cow's milk is 3 to 4%, so it's much higher level depending on the breed of cow. So human milk major proteins are whey, whereas the cow's milk major protein is casein. So you've already got a difference going on there. Most proteins in human milk are whey protein, but they're not the same whey protein as in cow's milk. Human milk has no beta-lactoglobulin, which is the major whey protein in bovine milk. And bovine milk has very little lactoferrin, which is a major whey protein in human milk, so it's sort of a flip over. Lactoferrin in human milk is a protective factor as it has antibacterial properties. So human babies should have human milk. I think that tells us that. So human versus cow's beta casein. Human beta protein is a shorter protein chain. All human beta casein is A2 type, the anti-inflammatory sort, with the adjacent amino acid. So this proline is at 67 in cow's milk and it's at 58 in the human milk. And the BCM7 in human milk is totally different. It's tyrosine, proline, phenylalanine, valine, glucogen, proline and lysine. So there's only 2 prolines in there. The 2 amino acids are different to the cow A1 type. The beta casein in cow's milk is a longer proline chain and it has these 3 prolines in. And the proline and the glycine have been exchanged for a valine and a glutamine here. So you've got this total different chemistry in these cow and human proteins. So did I just press that and it changed, or am I on the same one? BCM from human milk is not the same as BCM from cow's milk. The opioid properties of BCM7 from human milk are 10 times weaker than in the bovine form, and human milk releases much less BCM7 and is more like the A2 milk. It's more anti-inflammatory. It's very different BCM7 to that in cows. So the relative opioid effect of human milk has less than 1,000th the potential potency of cow's milk. This is Keith Woodford, The Devil in the Milk, Craig Potton Publishing. So the animal dairy beta casein, what about other animal milk, was my question. So goat's milk contains A2 beta casein and no A1 beta casein. So if you're getting a pro-inflammatory effect from having cow's milk, like arthritis, achy joints, perhaps on goat's milk that reaction may die down more. Sheep's milk contains the A2 beta casein, not the A1. Yak milk, although we are far from Tibet, has only A2 beta casein, and the Bos indicus cattle in Asia contain only A2 beta casein. So when people come and live here, where we're having the A1 beta casein, is that why they get more of our Western diseases? Because they're having a different sort of protein in their milk. The A2 beta casein was the original beta casein. The A1 beta casein is relatively new. There was a gene mutation which triggered it on the 6th chromosome between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago, after the last ice age, the Younger Dryas. And what is the interesting thing is that before the last ice age, how now, brown cow, all the cows on planet Earth were apparently brown. And after the last ice age, we got the black and white cows. So something the stress of the ice age may have mutated the proline spot at 67, the proline spot at 67 into a histidine. So some stress in the animal over that time of the ice age may have triggered this problem. So what we're saying is, if you have a casein allergy, a true allergy that causes anaphylaxis, you have to be off all forms of dairy. If you're getting an inflammatory, digestive, achy joint reaction, then maybe you should try going on to goat, sheep's and buffalo milk and seeing if that more anti-inflammatory protein calms the system down. But of course we then come on to, if you're lactose intolerant or you cut your casein, where do you get your calcium from? Because of course milk is a great source of calcium. So this is milligrams per 100 grams. So kelp seaweed, you can have vegetarian sushi. Carob flour, you could cook things with some carob flour. Nuts and seeds, almonds, Brazil nuts, parsley. You see, when you're in the Lebanon, it's totally different to here. Here you get a little tiny sprig of parsley to make your meal look pretty. In the Lebanon, they chop it up with tomatoes and vinaigrette, and you eat it as a vegetable. So why not get a big bunch of parsley, make some parsley sauce, chop it into your tuna, make something with it that's nice. Toss it in your salads. Corn tortilla with lime. Watercress, tofu, dried figs, ripe olives, green leafy vegetables like broccoli, oats and whole grain cereals, rhubarb to my delight. I can eat as much rhubarb as I need, so that's good. Salmon and sardines, the tinned ones, have got soft bones, so you can eat that, and that's quite high. And legumes, peas, beans and lentils. So you've got other sources of calcium that you can have, but you need to make sure you're having enough every day. In Japan, they tell the population to eat 100 different foods a day, and they have lots of little dishes, different bowls of things. So we need to have, I think what it tells you is that you need to have a wide variety of different foods every day, not the same old thing day in, day out. So what can you eat? If you can't do cow's milk, then there's oat milk, almond, hazelnut milk, my favourite, rice milk, soya milks. There are soft soya cheeses. There are some rice cheeses, but they've got weighing, so people couldn't have those. Hummus, guacamole, vegetable pate, carrot, chestnut pate, mushroom pate. Poor man's caviar, my favourite, it's Russian. You chop an aubergine, chop an onion, lightly fry it, put in lots of tomatoes, cook it down to a paste, it's delicious. Tara masalata, dairy-free foods from Free-From, Live Well ranges, and Play Mill dairy-free chocolate. So you can, although you're excluding some things, you can bring in replacements which still have nutrients in. So breakfast you can have a mushroom omelette, some mint, fennel or lemon and ginger tea. Lunch a salmon salad, potato salad you make yourself, lettuce, tomato, spring onion, avocado and a sorbet. Dinner a chicken curry, broccoli rice, strawberries and soya cream. Snack on nuts and seeds, corn tacos, hummus, fresh fruit, plain crisp, poppadoms. So you're not going to starve exactly. There are still things you can eat. The other thing that worried me as well was dairy pollutants. There are persistent organic pollutants like mold aflatoxins from contaminated feed, which is in food additive and contaminants. So toxins are stored in fat. So high-fat dairy products are likely to contain some dioxins, PCBs, bisphenol A and phthalates. And the research, which is environmental health perspectives, shows that 254 grams of milk a day would have 0.04 pg per gram level of dioxin. So, you have to not have too much because it does have some pollutants in it. In America, a lot of the cattle have growth hormone, and antibiotics are used to fatten cattle and chickens, so you can get residues present in the milk and the meat. So you have to take that into account. So if your gut's been compromised, what are we going to do? Because we've got to do this gastrocentric support. So we've got to go for a probiotic, which has a definite role to play in the control of Th17 cell production via cytokine IL-27, because they together produce an inflammatory cytokine IL-10, interleukin-10, which can trigger inflammation. So if your gut's compromised by the gluten and then the lactose, it can upset the gut flora and it can all flare up into inflammation. So this is nature immunology. So you've got to go for some sort of acidophilus support which will inhibit or control the IL interleukin 17 production. So dysregulation of the immune system, recognizing signals from the trillions of human microflora in order to shape and maintain or destroy human intolerance, is in the Science magazine. So your gut flora, there are trillions of cells in there, and usually if you've eaten something it doesn't like, it does let you know. So what can you take? The Saccharomyces boulardii. So that assists and improves growth and proliferation of mucosal cells. It increases secretory IgA production. It reduces the gut permeability. It increases the brush border enzyme activity. It neutralizes pathogenic toxins. It suppresses pro-inflammatory interleukin-8 chemokine. It increases spermicides to maintain mucosal integrity, and it inhibits excess zonulin, reducing gut permeability. This is in gastroenterology, and this one is in the Journal of American Medical Association. So probiotics are obviously important to get your gut flora back again. Production of antioxidants, they help. They increase production of secretory IgA. They help production of antimicrobial bacteria. They improve transcription of NF-kappa B, which is inflammatory. Induction of pro and anti-inflammatory cytokines. They help bacterial DNA-induced TLR9 signaling. Their anti-inflammatory effect with colitis. They elevate serum IL-10, which helps. The induction of dendritic cells maturation, which help the brush border. They enhance serum antibody responses to orally and systemically administered antigens. They enhance immune reactivity of spleen cells and phagocytes so that they can mop up all the debris and bad toxins. They activate the gene for human beta defensin 2 in the intestinal mucosa. They help induction of oral tolerance to beta-lactoglobulin. They help production of beta-galactidase, improving the lactose intolerance. And they help induction of papyri to reduce local inflammation in the gut. So taking a good probiotic will help your gut membrane heal.
On the probiotics,
Yes.
which are the best ones?
Acidophilus, Lactobacillus acidophilus, there are all different ones. I mean, there are so many.
Or the
I can't name companies, but all the companies that are sold at the Nutricentre, if you ring up and ask, they'll tell you which are the best ones, because there are different ones for different things. Some of the bioacidophilus fortes are very good mixers. I can't name a product, but if you ring them, they'll tell you, because there are lots of different ones. The other thing, when they asked people what was helping them, they said glutamines and slippery elm and epithelial growth factors. So they reduce inflammation and repair the epithelial barrier in the gastrointestinal tract. And glutamine as an amino acid is important for cellular health. It's the food that the gut membrane needs to renew. And there's research showing that especially in people who've been in fires and burnt, it can help, or if you've been in trauma or shock. And slippery elm is the inside bark of an elm tree. It's the part of the trunk that takes the nutrients from the roots up to the leaves. And they powder it down, and you mix it. I mean, I used to take it as a liquid. I used to mix 3 teaspoons of slippery elm powder with a teaspoon of licorice and make it into a drink, which was rather gloopy. But that helped my gut membrane heal. But now you can get tablets, and it forms a gel-like nutrient-rich coating throughout the gut and helps it to heal and reduces the inflammation. So why should we bother? I mean, you can take antacids and lactulose and lactase enzyme. But the question is, does the immune system suffer long term? If you're putting a food into your body, which your body's reacting to, what's the long term thing? Does my pancreas react? Does it affect my health in old age? Does it mean I'm more prone to other infections if my immune system's constantly on red alert? Does it mean I won't live a long and healthy life? Because my husband's auntie was 100 yesterday. We had Elizabeth, who died at Christmas, was 105. Both my grandparents lived to 101, and they were fit and healthy. My granddad was driving in his 90s. You know, Elizabeth was rolling her stool down the garden and cutting her hedge and garden when she was 101. That's what we want to be like. And there is a book called The Blue Zone, which goes through all the things that the cultures around the world do to live into their healthy hundreds. So we want a healthy old age. We don't want to be ill. Yes. Have you excuse me, have you got any Blue Zone books? Yes. I've just bought one, so I know there is one. So the end stage allergy. If you're a child and you react to foods and you come off them, and then you go back and you seem alright, it may be that you've adapted and got a mast allergy. But if it's not addressed properly in childhood, if you ignore the warning signs, the problems you experience later on can be quite serious. Did you push it in the bag? It's this one. It's the Blue Zone. It's National Geographic, and it's by Dan Buettner, Buettner. But it's quite fascinating. It looks at Costa Rica, Laura Loma, Okinawa, and Sardinia, where there are groups of people living to 100 and living healthily to 100. And it goes through all the commonalities between them, what they're eating, how they're living, what their social life is like, and it's fascinating. So if you don't address all these problems early on, you may get irritable bowel, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, bladder problems, high blood pressure, irregular heartbeats, arteriosclerosis, arthritis. Your bowels talk to you, but few people pay attention. So listen now to what your bowel's telling you, because it does complain. Of course, you could get a wrong diagnosis. So you have to keep being persistent. Is something else medically wrong? Are there any other foods causing a problem? It may not just be one thing. You know, people with arthritis react to potatoes, aubergines, peppers. What's the other one? Tomatoes, potatoes, aubergines, peppers. Because they're deadly nightshade family and they can trigger inflammation. So there could be something else going on. Have you been checked for celiac disease, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, endometriosis? If the diet is complied with correctly and the diagnosis is correct, then you may need more checks. There may be something else going on somewhere. So, the end. So if you need to ask me anything, just email me and I'll reply. Was that helpful? Are there any questions?
Sorry, possible to have some notes on what you have discussed because it's a lot of stuff.
Yes, I've put this up on my website. It'll be on endometriosis.co.uk, so you'll be able to follow it.
Thanks.
If you wish. Yes, the whole PowerPoint will be there for you to follow, so you can get everything. So, tomorrow, yes, not tonight, because I'm miles away.
So you need to be off
You need-
lactose or gluten for about a month before.
Well, obviously, if it's a casein reaction, and it's a true